Welcome back to Auto Intel. I'm your host Sudas Vijayan, and today we have an exciting guest joining us, Eric Brown, CEO at InSearchX, a seasoned entrepreneur who has built multiple successful companies in the automotive tech space, including Dataim, which he successfully exited to IHS. Eric is recognized for innovation, featured in Forbes and Automotive News and the Wall Street Journal. This episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Personamize.ai, your AI solution for automating dealership lead follow-ups and boosting conversions. Eric, you have had an impressive journey building several innovating companies. Could you tell us what drives your passion, and especially within the automotive and tech?
So I have this disease called fearless curiosity. And of course, now with artificial intelligence, it's only been accelerated just because there's so much available to us, right? And I think what happens is, as you pursue the why, the questions out there, opportunities present themselves. And I guess I'm, also a little bit naive. I've never let fear get in the way of pursuing that curiosity and seeing if we can get something accomplished.
Makes sense. So, like being naive and you founded Datium as well. So, and
Correct.
it turned into a industry-leading analytics firm. So, what were some like crucial lessons you learned while scaling this company that you'd like to share in our podcast?
So, um, you start with a vision of where you think you're going, but largely if you stay true to the mission and the vision, you end up there. But the path along the way has lots of turns, lots of road bumps, lots of people giving you advice, a lot of it good, some of it they don't have the context you do or whatever. But just listening to your customers, trying to find that product market fit. Generally starts with listening and then responding. And the tricky part, and sometimes it's as much luck as it is skill of understanding, when the listening is singing a song and not just noise.
Makes sense. So, like when I like noticed your LinkedIn, I saw that your exit strategy involved selling Dataim to a major multinational firm. So, what insights this experience give you to acquisition and growth strategy?
Yeah, so I think so. There's kind of two questions in there. One is the exit strategy. If you find product market fit, then usually that's impacting an incumbent in the space. And there's two incumbents: one that want to acquire you to protect, and another incumbent that wants to acquire you to learn and to grow and expand and make certain that they're not selling buggy whips in a couple of years. And so that's a tricky part too, especially when you have other shareholders and those kinds of things of, you guys, because you've given birth to something, you want it to grow up and have its own children, and not every suitor that comes along has that concept. Some they just want to lock it in the closet, right? So, but shareholders are shareholders. So there's a lot of, not necessarily conflict, but can be rub in terms of what the right exit is in terms of the objectives. In terms of growth strategy, I don't know if I know the answer to that story or that question. No, it's just a lot of phone calls, conversations like you and I are having, telling the story, listening, learning to tell the story about her. I mean, one of the tricks I will say, and I think every startup, particularly one that's trying to define a new marketplace or trying not to sell another hammer, but remove the nails from the process, really trying to make a difference in the way things are done. It's very tricky to tell your story in a way that your customers understand because it's relatable to something they already use. Yet you tell the story with enough differentiation, they go, well, this is something different and that I need to pay attention to. And it's just that is really a tough fine line. And I often talk about, wasn't that long ago if you said, I'm going to go buy a TV, you'd clarify, I'm going to go buy a flat screen TV, or I'm going to buy a microwave oven, or I need to go buy a phone. And what comes to our mind today when we say I'm going to buy a TV is a flat screen TV. It wasn't long ago we had to declare I'm buying a flat screen. A microwave, we always had to tie with the word oven because we didn't, if you said, I'm going to go buy a microwave at Walmart, people would be like, what? You're buying radio signals? What is that? And then the same with the phone. If I say to you, I'm going to go buy a new phone, you immediately think this, right? Well, so there's always that sort of transition between, well, I have a phone. Well, you don't have a phone like this. I have an oven. We don't have an oven like this,
Exactly.
but you have to relate it in a way that's something they already have and in context, but at the same time, not close enough to say, well, I already have that. I don't need that, right? So it's really, I'll end there, but that's the really tough part to me in the growth conversation is telling the story in a way that's compelling but yet relatable. Maybe that's the way to look.
Makes sense. It's like eventually the way that you portray your story. And is it the same like motivation that you had in launching InSearchX, especially the AskAuto.ai platform?
Yes, Ask Auto was actually born from the data of Dadium.
Okay.
So Dadium was tracking consumer behavior through the clickstream. What it clicks, and we would score using unstructured clickstream across thousands and thousands of sites, from cars.com to AutoTrader to Beaman Toyota to Toyota.com to buy a Toyota, just everywhere. And we would structure that to score intent. I used to say we measured the difference between curious and serious. And what I saw in that consumer behavior as we watched them move across all of those websites was a lot of breakage. Breakage one in the navigation to finding the car they want, because as a good friend of mine, Tony Rhodes, often says, consumers are not professional car shoppers. So when they do a search and only 3 or 4 show up above the fold on the website, they don't scroll. In fact, less than half do scroll. So the perfect car for them that you as a dealer put in the inventory for them, it eludes them many times. They just don't get there. And so we're sort of victims of how a consumer utilizes their phone or their browser. And then the other thing I saw was just the lead form. The lead forms were just complete breakage. You go from having 100 people on your site to basically two as soon as you put them in a form. And that didn't make any sense. And so as I thought about and sort of looked down the road, I said, well, okay, all these websites have now moved to the cloud. When we started, they were on private servers. So now that all that data is accessible, and thus things like generative AI exist only because the cloud exists, and the ability to source all that data. And then the next thing was the form. And I said, well, my laptop is connected to my phone and my phone is connected to other people's phones. Why do I need a phone, or excuse me, why do I need a form to activate a conversation about the products or services that I want? Why can't I just do that with one prompt? And that's not what I called it. That's not what I called it 10 years ago, but that's the term today. And so, fast forward, we now have technology where I can, with one button, essentially skip the lead form completely, open a conversation that's managed through a digital assistant. And I mean two people talking to each other. I don't mean two machines talking to each other. We're using machines to connect people. And I can open that conversation at any point with one simple click. And as a result, we just got some data back this week from one of the dealers that uses our technology on their website. And, they have had a $35 cost per sale.
Oh,
Just by,
that's
yeah,
awesome.
1/20th the normal cost, right? And the reason is, one, the cost to connect a consumer just went from hundreds of dollars to a few dollars. And that's the power of AI, to remove friction. Friction has cost. Remove forms. Forms have cost. Forms have follow-up. If you remove all of that, you've just collapsed the funnel to that first click, that first signal of intent. All of a sudden you can deliver conversations about cars for a fraction of the cost that we're used to. And that was the vision. That's what came out of the Dadium data, was all of this stuff is connected. We're literally collecting data across tens of thousands of sites into one server farm, our own. Why are we making consumers, fill out forms and bounce all over the internet to get what they want?
Makes sense. So, like, to wrap it everything, is this like a kind of a conversational agent that we have in the website?
And it's different in this. In some cases, we are serving the agentics, the conversational. Ours is more of a digital assistant. I was sort of joking earlier this week, where I'm sure when President Trump and Putin get on the phone, they're not dialing a phone, they're not waiting on hold, they're not going through any prompts. They have admin that say, pick up the phone now. And essentially that's what our AI is doing. It's saying, okay, this person has sent me a prompt that they want to speak to somebody at Fred Haas Nissan about this Altima. And so we will then go, okay, great. And that prompt comes via SMS most often, which is just one click of a button anywhere in an ad campaign, a QR code scan on a website, marketplaces. We have hundreds of marketplaces now incorporating this.
Yes.
And because I can just click that one button, that sends an SMS prompt to the AI. Then the AI says to the consumer via their text, hey, oh great, I've got your request. I'm going to connect you as the digital assistant for Fred Haas Nissan to their first available salesperson. Done,
Okay.
right? At that point, from the consumer perspective. And a lot of times we get these requests midnight, 11 a.m., 2 a.m., not 11 a.m., 11 p.m., 2 a.m., that kind of thing. And so the AI is sitting there waiting. And we can also provide additional information before the call to sort of grease the wheels, if you will, before the call happens.
Yeah.
Then when we call the store, the salesperson answers. The salesperson hears a prompt that tells them, hey, this is Ask Auto, your digital assistant. I'm about to connect you with a consumer who has an interest in this vehicle. And then the connection is made. And that by our pricing model too is we only charge when that connection is made. So you've skipped everything in between, and as a result of that, the cost and the close rate on an inbound call is higher than a form fill, simply because you talk to every connection is a connection, right? There's no I fill out a form and
Yes.
hope we're gonna play. There's no phone tag.
Yes.
And what's amazing when you remove all of that stuff, and so our approach has been, rather than building a fancier hammer, has been removing the nails, and the nails being navigation and forms. Those are both, navigation is friction, forms are friction. And so by removing that and connecting instantly, you dramatically change the cost of doing business. It's the same reason we have robots in warehouses, right? It removes the labor and the cost that is normally associated with moving stuff around a building.
So what I can understand is that your solution significantly boosts the conversion rates, and it also eliminates the friction points that typically hinder the customer interactions.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, so 8 times as many people will click the button, call me, or please call me, or I need to know more about this car. Different implementations, call to actions can be any call to action. It's just a different prompt. Any button can prompt an AI to call any number. And then, so because what's easier for a consumer? Call me, please call me, or here's my phone number, here's my name, here's my address,
Yeah.
boom, 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 hit submit. I hope I hear from you, which 48% of the time they won't hear. Actually, it's more than that. It's over 50% of the time they won't hear from the dealership.
Makes
So we eliminate that too, right? So that's the other thing we started working on recently too with CRMs is, if you think about a CRM, because humans weren't made for software, they were made for humans. Okay. And so what we're doing in the CRM space is, there's all that data in there. All that data are just forms of prompts. Right now they're used to prompt a salesperson to log in and to interact with the data and make an outbound phone call and call 8 or 9 times to try to get somebody on the phone. And we are saying, okay, well, we have this technology. I'll just call the salesperson. The CRM, the CRM software will talk to us, our software, our AI, and we'll call the salesperson and they'll answer the phone. So, and then be prompted on the phone and then connected to the consumer, rather than ever logging into any software, doing anything with the CRM. And by the way, when the call is over, because we have a transcript, it's logged in the CRM. So everything happens. All the salesperson has to do is answer the phone and be good at it.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
It's again automation of the CRM, right? Because again, what happens? Humans break it. They don't log in. They don't follow up. They don't. I love humans, but there's a lot of friction. There's a lot of software gets in the way between us as humans. This morning ourselves, right? Because I was on the wrong platform and had to jump over to another platform, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it also the agent will be also giving the informations that they had in the previous calls and all the information, and also regarding the connectivity to Meta, like how does that work? Like if you can give a brief about that to our audience. Happens when the lead, for example, when a leads comes in and they click an ad, like post that, what happens?
Yes. So what we're doing is connecting the two humans, and so the salesperson can follow whatever process on that they want to. Again, we can help accelerate that process. Now we do have some of the agentic companies in the licensing process, if you will, where we'll call their AI. And so what we're seeing and what you're starting to see in the data is, for those decisions that require an emotional response, which is, by the way, 80% of them. If you look at the Harvard research, all of that, buying a car is an emotional decision as much as a factual decision. Can I afford it? That kind of thing. But it's the salesperson that gets the extra $3,000 for the version of the car sold, kind of thing. But AI, the agentics, the data is really strong on the transactional conversation. So when is my appointment, or booking an appointment, or what's my bank balance, or ordering a pizza, things that are transactional in nature. People, based on the market research I'm seeing, are all for AI because it's faster and they're not trying to be sold something. But in those instances where you're wanting to sell something and it requires an emotional response, Then we need to, I think in my mind, is look at AI as a way to remove what gets in the way of having that emotional connection with another person and coming to a decision, maybe rationalized by the facts, but ultimately it's, I think I'm going to look good in this car, and this car's going to get my kids to work and or whatever, right, to school. And everybody has their own reasons. Everybody has their own why.
Yeah,
But it's so far right now, it's tough for AI to discern why in the interactions.
makes
Humans are
sense.
good at
Makes
that.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, you have worked extensively with AI tools. So, like, where do you see the biggest opportunities emerging in the automotive AI?
Well, obviously, I think it's removing the friction on the path to purchase and enabling consumers to engage much, much more quickly. One, get the information they need to take the emotional journey of buying a car or get that quicker, but then also getting connected to somebody, kind of, reinforce their assumptions, right? But and then there's a lot just on, especially with imaging and that type of thing, where the condition of a car in the fixed ops area. I think there's a lot of opportunity. There's like robotics, even just the amount of payroll going into people moving parts from the parts warehouse into the repair bay. Oh, there's real opportunities there to reduce cost. And again, that's, one of the pros and cons of AI is its ability to sort of remove the transactional activities of consumers, or excuse me, of us humans, or the administrative functions. So looking at AI to remove administration, looking at AI to better move and understand data. One of my favorite things is we just got a contract this week from a very large advertiser, a big insurance company, and it's pages and pages. And so the first thing I did was put it through an AI to give me a summary, and it kind of helped point me toward the things I really needed to focus on within the agreement. Where are the anomalies, that kind of thing. And I can see that really playing out in the fixed ops area. Just with microphones listening to engines, they'll get smart enough to, just as a seasoned tech, can do that as well. But
Yeah.
being able to sort of get there faster, right, and then store that data. I mean, I guess that's the other thing too. We used the last thing that the other part of our piece is we do the voice of customer analysis. So we have these conversations, and this actually was a big part of what compelled me to pursue this when I first realized this at Dadium. What the clickstream data was telling us was the how, the what, and the where consumers were shopping, but it's the conversation with the salesperson that would tell you why. And ultimately, why is what matters most. Why is that person on that website? Why is that person thinks a Honda Accord or a Toyota Camry is right for them, et cetera. And so that's where I think the real opportunity too is to take masses, and we're doing this, taking massive a number of voices and distill them into a common understanding, and then do really interesting things like, here's all the sales conversations your team has had in the last 30 days. How does your website content align with those conversations? What is your CSI score going to be in 30 days? Where are the problems? Where is your sales training being reflected in the conversations? Where isn't it? Where do you have a compliance risk because they're misrepresenting the finance terms, or maybe they just find they're being inappropriate with their sales prospects or whatever. And so all of that, what's interesting about AI, and I think this is where the big opportunities to sort of narrow down this a little bit, is where you have massive amounts of data that need to be distilled quickly into essentially, I did with the advertiser contract, distill that in a very quick way so it can hone me as a human and on where do I need to focus and not have to go through that haystack to find the needle. Just show me where the needles are and I can go focus on the needles.
Makes sense. So it's very important to understand the why. You have been nominated multiple times as Entrepreneur of the Year. So, what leadership qualities have been most instrumental in your success?
Yeah, so I have a little joke about this, but I think it's true. That is, always hire people smarter than you, and in my case, that's never been a struggle. So I think it's having good people. It's listening. Silence is golden. I say that one. So shut up and get rich. It's trying to understand what drives people's happiness too, because that's ultimately what informs their decisions. And I think it's those three things: listening to understand what people define as happiness. What is the resistance and the friction in that? Although in our world, in the automotive world, there's forms and navigation or frictions to finding my happiness of owning this car. Nobody buys a car because they think they're going to be less happy. And so it's understanding that and listening to that, and then making sure you have people around you that have that critical thinking skill, have the ability to do the same and distill it, into an action step that resolves to a solution. But generally, it's a path. If you look at all those things I mentioned earlier, the microwave, path of least resistance to getting my baked potato faster or my popcorn faster, right? A phone, path of least resistance to getting a better phone and making me happier. Of course, debatable. All the bottled water. Like, there was a time people were marveled at water coming out of a faucet. Now we won't drink it unless it comes prepackaged. And it's just that
Exactly.
it's understanding that consumer motivation, pursuit of happiness, and then figuring out what's in the way of that for most people, and figuring out having my stuff delivered to me in a day without having to, drive down the hill to the store and that kind of thing. So, I mean, it's endless. Yeah.
So speaking about like customer satisfaction, like are there any specific growth strategy or frameworks you consistently apply when entering new markets or like launching new products?
I know I'm oversimplifying this, but because I don't think there's that, step one, do this, step two, do this, step three, do this, because there'd be 10 million Amazons out there. There'd be 10 million, Teslas. It'd be just, it really comes down to that listening and understanding why people are, like right now you're spending time with me. There's something about spending time with me, and same for me with you, that says, oh, this should be part of my pursuit or height of happiness, right? This is part of the path I'm willing to take. I'm willing to put up the friction of figuring out this software this morning, getting up and, shaving and all those things, that's all part of the process, right? And so it's understanding that, and your customers will tell you that, your users will tell you that, if you're willing to listen. And I'm not always good at that. I'll be completely honest about that. And then being able to discern that in a way, because there's always that element too. Henry Ford, or not, was it Henry Ford? I can't remember now. Said, if I asked people what they wanted, they wanted a faster horse, versus a car, right? And Jobs sort of had the same, thing about nobody was asking him for a cell phone at the time. You're crazy to give cell phones away. What makes you think somebody's going to spend $500 for a cell phone? So there's that little bit of, and that's where the great ones are.
Exactly.
I'm not one of them, but that's still that ability to listen and to discern. Oh, I can see a solution to this. I can see that we don't need nails, so therefore we building fancier hammers is a costly pursuit of intermittent solution, but it's not, like the doctor said, it hurts when I raise my right arm. The old joke is, well, quit raising your right arm, right? So rather than have somebody help you raise your right arm.
Yeah, that makes sense. So like have you got any business advice that have like stuck within your mind that you ever received?
Yeah, if you want to win the game, change the rules.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
it's pretty
cool.
simple. I think that was in Chaos. Was it Tom Peters? The idea that it's hard to iterate pivotal change, right? You have to really sort of change the rules. That search did that, the internet did that, AI is doing that. Open AI did that, right? They changed it, like, it changed the rules of how all of us were going to use AI overnight, and really
Exactly.
made a lot of things possible that weren't, right? They changed the rules. Open source changed the rules, right? There's just so many of them. Tesla changed the rules on how you manufacture a car. So
Also how you
now,
sell a car.
and how you sell a car, yeah. I think a lot of people, I agree with that, but I think also a lot of people underestimate the what they did in terms of the actual manufacturing process itself that dramatically changed their, I'm misquoting these numbers, but I was listening to a podcast not long ago, and there's a company they were talking about, they break down cars, the parts, and they were saying, in a typical domestically built, vehicle here, there's 120 parts in the trunk mechanism. In a Tesla, there's four, or, some number like that.
Okay.
It's just, so that's what I mean. They changed the rules of how you put a trunk on a car, where everybody else was like, well, we're just going to have better parts. Well, they're like, no, you don't need those parts at all. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
is there any
Instead of
common,
fancier hammers, remove the nails,
yeah,
right? Same concept. Yeah,
same
yeah.
concept. So is that the common myth about entrepreneurship you would like to dispel?
A common myth that everybody can be one. I'm trying to think what some of the myths would be. Do you have a specific myth that came to mind? It may most fail, that's for sure. And I think, don't let perfect get in the way of great, or great get in the way of good. You just, when I have people ask me about starting a business, I just say start and start asking questions. And my customer base today is not what I thought it was going to be. Our product is not, we started with one solution and figured out that it wasn't going to work the way it should. And then fortunately, things like OpenAI came along and that enabled new capabilities. And now we have a solution, right, that cuts cost of sale by 90%.
Exactly. One essential book or resource you would recommend to every entrepreneur.
Well, so this has nothing to do with business, what it does. Seven Habits of Highly Effective People
Okay.
by Stephen Covey. Yeah. Because you have to have that sort of willingness to ask questions and listen and understand that not everybody sees the world as it is. They see the world, not everybody sees the world as you see it, right? We're conditioned to see the world as we're conditioned to see it. And then in there, it talks a lot about building your circle of influence. Really important in entrepreneurship to be able to pick up the phone and go, hey, I have an idea. And have people smarter than you around you. Well, that doesn't happen without building, circles of relationships, and then that sort of builds on itself once you have some success and that. But yeah, that's the book I would say, just because all the business books are hard to execute the ideas behind them if you haven't first sort of built that fundamental foundation within your own self. And of course, the Bible's right
Yes.
there with it too.
Makes sense. So, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People.
With people,
So that's in my cart right now. I'll just purchase it post
yeah.
the podcast.
Yeah, it's been out a long time, but it's an excellent book for preparing yourself for lots of things coming at you.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So, what's your top practical tip for business struggling with converting leads and engaging customers effectively?
So I mean, it would be listen to the voice of the customer. They will tell you, months ahead of everybody else what it is that's getting in the way. And fortunately, and I see this in automotive, we lock in processes, and we have, I saw this in my last company. Actually, we had an ability to look at online behavior, and we could flag a lead in a CRM and say they're going to buy a car in 72 hours because of the change in their behavior, that the algorithms were telling us that this is imminent. I mean, we knew the behavior after looking at it millions of times, what behavior was most indicative of a car purchase, an imminent car purchase. And so we would send that flag to CRMs that were managing our customers' lead flow. And unfortunately, the dealers had a policy in some cases. Well, every lead that comes in today, we have to follow up within 2 minutes because the data tells us that the faster we follow up, the more cars we sell.
Exactly. Is
But
it,
as a result of
what do you
that,
think? Like, is it true?
no,
Okay.
it's only true if you follow up well. So we see this
Good
all the
example.
time. Like I could tell you, like when somebody submit a lead, there were some dealers we could tell you, oh man, that's the worst thing that happened for that dealer, is they would submit a lead because the consumer's going to run from that. I'm thinking of a Ford dealer off the top of my head. They're going to run from that Ford dealer, and we would see the behavior switch instantly. Like that's like the last thing that dealer wants is anybody submitting a lead. They want them to show up in the showroom because they're far enough down the funnel they can't break it. That's a whole nother conversation. But what would happen is we tell people that, so what would happen is this lead that's going to buy in 72 hours, they wouldn't get till Friday. So let's say we told them on Monday, we said they're going to buy a car by Wednesday. They wouldn't follow up on that lead because they were so busy following up on today's leads. They didn't have time. They didn't have capacity to follow up on the lead from 3 weeks ago that's finally far enough along the path to purchase to make a decision. They're emotionally ready to buy the car, emotionally and financially ready. And so they wouldn't follow up till Friday. And then I'd get a call from a general manager saying, this data's not working. And I'd say, well, why? And they'd say, well, every time we call somebody, they've already bought a car. And I say, well, give me an example. I said, yeah. We told you they're going to buy a car by Wednesday. When'd you call them? Today. Well, today's Friday. They have already bought a car. We had the data. We had the technology. We had the fighter jet. You just refused to fly it. You wanted to drive it down the road like the car you're used to, right? And that's the biggest thing I would say is don't let your processes get in the way of your customer.
Makes sense. Like, what do you have to say about like dealerships, like stay away from AI and AI agents, specifically voice agents?
So I say yes and no. It's just like any tool in the world, it comes down, there's people who say stay away from EVs, or autonomous vehicles, or stay away from a brand. It comes down to the use case. So I think that's been true with any tool we've ever invented. So I don't think it's a stay away with or embrace. I think it's not even AI. To me, focusing on AI is the wrong focus. The focus should be on the customer and saying, where can these tools, these new technology tools coming on board, where can they provide a better experience for my consumer and remove the friction, on the path to purchase, either accelerate it, make it more transparent, whatever it might be, whatever the voice the customer is telling them, use your tools to fix it, right? It's just like if we go back in time, it wasn't robots or no robots, is what can robots do to help us build a better car for less money, right? And
Yeah.
that's been true with every innovation that we as humans. And sadly, the car, right? The car can do wondrous things, and it can do terrible things like drive through parades. And a human can drive a car through a parade and kill lots of people, but then that same car you can take all those people to the hospital and save their lives. The same technology. And so I think AI shouldn't be the focus. To your earlier question, focus is your customers and what tools best align with meeting the needs of my customers, right? And being able to provide the best experience and at the best value for them, right? How do I remove friction between me and my customers? Well, does AI help me do that? Great. Where does it help me do it best? I don't think it's a yes or no question.
Makes sense. Before we wind up the podcast, do you have any upcoming projects that you would like to share with the audience?
Let's see. So we are working on what we're calling a voice of customer intelligence engine. We've got some folks actually starting here the first of the month from some of the top universities that we're going to work with them to launch the voice of the customer. As I was just talking about, that the dealerships have better information, and we've actually already working with some of the CDPs in the space to add. Not if you think about CDPs are mainly observational data, and so what we want to add is dialogue data. What does the customer have to say about their why? Why are they buying for a car? What motivates them? What compels them? Not just the path to it, but why do they even get up in the morning and get on the path? And then understanding, okay, if I understand that, how do my salespeople have a conversation that's, how do I make that when I have a conversation with a consumer, it's the best thing that could happen for my dealership today. Unlike we used to see in some of the data at Dadium, we could predict it without that person they just submitted a lead to that Ford dealer. They're not going to buy a Ford. It was really unfortunate. I mean, it wasn't total, right? F-150 is a very strong product, but the odds, the probability of them buying a Ford went down as soon as they submitted the lead. It was fascinating to watch, actually, and that was some of the in the data, in the listening, right? Was like, a lead is not always what you want. A VDP view. There's still to this day, there's a lot of conversation about VDP views. You got to have VDP views. Well, not if your car is overpriced by 20%. Not if you don't have the right inventory, not if it's impossible to navigate, not if there's no way to, it's just, again, that is not the goal, is the VDP view. The goal is to provide information to the consumer that compels them down the path to purchase.
Exactly.
Does your VDP do that? And can AI enhance that? And if
That's
the
it.
answer is no in either case, start working on it.
Makes sense. So that's the upcoming project. So that was an incredible, insightful conversation with Eric. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and expertise with us today. And I'd like to connect with Eric and learn more about Ask Auto. You
Great.
can visit InSearchX.com. And and if you would like to connect with Eric, LinkedIn would be the best
Yeah,
platform.
or it's just eric@insearchx.com. They can
Okay.
just use my email. Yeah, I'm happy to, we never tire of talking about ourselves. So,
So
yeah.
again, special thanks to our sponsor, Personamize.ai, our AI solution for automating dealerships and lead follow-ups and boosting conversions. Until next time, keep innovating and transforming. Cheers.